I didn't cheat on her. I just kept quiet, even when the entire country read about what I like to do in bed. My name is Kyle. Once, I was one of the most sought-after psychologists in the country. Now, I'm just a cautionary tale with a Wikipedia entry and a reputation that crumbled faster than a cheap chair on live television. And it all started with an interview. She said it was nothing. Just press, she told me, with that breezy, calculated smile of hers, the kind that always made me feel like I was already 10 steps behind in a game I didn't know we were playing. Her name was Marissa, a lifestyle influencer, podcaster, and lately, a, quote, female empowerment icon with over 1 million followers, my wife. So when a well-known journalist from the Glass Hour reached out to profile her, I was happy for her. It was a big deal. National exposure. A glossy spread. She was thrilled. I was proud. That morning, she kissed me on the cheek, adjusted the neckline of her blouse twice in the mirror, and walked out the door like it was just another step in her journey upward. And for a while I believed her. The article dropped on a Thursday. I was finishing up a session with a patient, middle-aged man, anxiety rooted in work performance, when my phone started lighting up like a Christmas tree. Texts from friends, former colleagues, even one from a reporter I hadn't heard from in years. At first I assumed the article must have gone viral. Maybe she said something profound. Maybe I got a mention. But when I clicked the link and saw the headline, my stomach dropped so fast I had to steady myself on my desk. Inside her mind, the influencer redefining female power, and what her bedroom reveals about her marriage. I felt the heat rise in my face before I even finished reading the first paragraph. There it was, in black and white. Our private life, stripped down, dissected, and served on a silver platter for the world to devour. She talked about my habits, my preferences, what I said to her after intimacy, the way I liked to keep the lights on, the way I once cried during a particularly vulnerable conversation. And then, she laughed. In print. Described it as charming at first, but clinical after a while. She compared sleeping with me to being interviewed for a role she wasn't sure she even auditioned for. Worse? She hinted that there had been someone else, that the interview had turned personal. The journalist, of course, ran with it, implied intimacy, used phrases like undeniable chemistry, and shared a bottle of wine that seemed to unravel more than her thoughts. And by the time the article hit trending lists, the damage was done. I wasn't just a man betrayed, I was a punchline, a case study in emasculation. Can you imagine being a therapist? Someone trained to read people, to catch warning signs, and realizing the biggest betrayal of your life happened right under your nose? I sat there for hours that night, the printed article crumpled in my lap. The house around me was dead silent. Marissa hadn't come home yet. Probably still out celebrating her rise, her headline moment. When the door finally opened close to midnight, I didn't move. She walked in slowly, like nothing was out of place. Her heels clicked confidently across the hardwood floor. And when she saw me sitting there in the dim light, she gave me that same smile I used to fall in love with, back when I was still stupid enough to believe smiles meant something. "Did you read it?" she asked. I didn't answer. She set her purse down gently on the table, poured herself a glass of water like we weren't sitting in the middle of a bomb crater. "People loved it," she said, sipping casually. "My follower count went up by like 10,000. I stared at her. "You told him about us." She blinked, then tilted her head slightly, like she didn't understand the question. "What do you mean? You told him about us?" "You told him things I've never even told my brothers. You turned my life, our life, into entertainment." She shrugged. Actually shrugged. "Kyle, it's just publicity. That's what sells now. Authenticity." "Authenticity?" My voice cracked on the word. "You let him imply you slept with him." She smiled again. This time, it wasn't warm. It was smug. Like she'd just pulled off the cleverest move in a long, calculated chess game. "Did I?" she said, sipping her water again. That's when I knew. Right then. She had. And she wasn't sorry. Not for the article. Not for the betrayal. Not for reducing me to a footnote in her rise to fame. I sat back in the chair, the fury boiling just beneath the surface, and realized the worst part wasn't what she'd done. It was that she didn't think I'd do anything about it. I should have shouted. I should have thrown something. Broken a glass, slammed a door, cursed the ceiling until my throat gave out. But all I did was sit there, still, like if I moved too fast, it would all come crashing down for real. She stood across from me, arms folded lightly over her chest, like she was waiting for me to finish a tantrum I hadn't even started. You ever look at someone you thought you knew, really knew, and suddenly feel like they've been rehearsing for a different play the whole time? That's what it felt like looking at Marissa that night. "Just tell me the truth," I finally said, voice low. "Did you sleep with him?" She didn't flinch, didn't even blink. Instead, she walked to the kitchen island, reached for her phone and started scrolling, like I'd just asked her if she'd remembered to buy eggs. "Why does it matter?" she said without looking up. I felt something twist in my chest, deep and slow, like a knife you don't even notice until it's turning. "It matters because you humiliated me," I said. "Because you used our marriage like it was a subplot in a gossip magazine. Because I trusted you." She set the phone down then, gently, almost too gently, and looked at me with this curious expression, like I was some old item she found in a drawer, trying to remember why she kept it. "I didn't name you," she said, voice calm, measured. "They printed what they wanted. Journalists do that." I laughed, bitter and sharp. "You fed him, Marissa. You handed him the narrative, and then sat back and watched it take off. You could have shut it down, clarified, denied. But you didn't. Why?" She paused, then walked slowly toward the window, looking out at the dark city below like it held the answer. And then, so casually it knocked the wind out of me, she said, "Because it got people talking." That was it. 6 years of marriage, one home, a shared life, a shared bed. And all I got was because it got people talking. I stood then. I couldn't sit anymore. My body was buzzing, like every nerve had been rewired. "You didn't just cheat on me," I said, my voice trembling more than I wanted it to. "You buried me. You dragged my career into it, my name, my profession. You humiliated a man who spent his life helping people manage pain. And you made me the punchline to a story I didn't ask to be in." She turned around, leaning her back against the window pane. Her silhouette looked almost peaceful against the city lights. "I didn't make you do anything," she said. "You chose to be silent. That was your brand, remember? Keep it clinical. Keep it safe." My fists clenched at my sides. "So that's it?" I asked. "You burn everything down and I'm just supposed to stand here and admire the flames?" Marissa exhaled through her nose and shook her head slowly. "No, Kyle," she said with the kind of detached calm that made me feel like I was losing my grip on reality. "You're supposed to evolve." I blinked at her. "Evolve?" She nodded, walking toward me now, like she was trying to explain something to a child. "You've always been stuck in control. With people. With me. Even with your image." I just gave it a little push. I stepped back, the air between us suddenly colder than it had ever been. "You call this a push?" She tilted her head. "I call it honesty." A silence stretched between us, tight and unbearable. Finally, I said what I knew she wasn't expecting. "I want you to pack a bag." That broke the mask. For just a split second, her eyes widened. "Excuse me? I want you out. Tonight. Go to a hotel, go to your sister's, I don't care. But I don't want you here when I wake up." She blinked. Once. Then again. Slowly. Processing. And then. She laughed. Not loudly. Just a breathy, almost amused exhale. "Kyle," she said, brushing an invisible thread from her blouse. "This is my apartment too." "No," I said quietly, walking to the front door. "This was ours. Now it's something I don't recognize anymore." She didn't move. Just stood there, arms crossed, eyes locked on me. "I'm not going anywhere," she said finally. "You're overreacting." I opened the door and looked at her, heart pounding in my ears. "I may be a lot of things right now, Marissa," I said, "but overreacting isn't one of them." Then I walked out, into the night, into the chill, into the one place she couldn't follow anymore, and for the first time since this all began, I let myself breathe. I didn't sleep that night. I laid on a friend's couch in a downtown condo that smelled like takeout and bachelorhood. There was a draft by the window and a persistent flickering from a nearby street lamp that made sleep impossible. But honestly, it wasn't the light that kept me up. It was him. The man who wrote the piece. The man who sat across from Marissa with his recorder and notepad and smirked his way through my life like it was some avant-garde theater piece. I needed to understand him. Not just what he'd written, but why, how he'd gotten her to open up like that, what he saw that I didn't. I found his email on his public profile. Sent a message at 3:17 a.m. It was short, cold, professional. "Coffee? No microphones, just you and me," he replied 5 minutes later. "Thought you might reach out." The next day I met him at a quiet cafe tucked between a bookstore and an antique shop. One of those places where everyone's writing a screenplay or pretending they are. He was already seated when I walked in, wearing a black turtleneck, looking like he'd stepped out of some profile piece about the tragic romance of tortured creatives. He stood when he saw me, smiling politely. Extended a hand like this was just business. "Jeremy," he said. I didn't shake it. He raised his eyebrows, then gestured toward the chair across from him. "Suit yourself." I sat, watching him closely. The way he stirred his espresso. The way he leaned back like he had nothing to hide. "You wrote that article," I said, cutting straight through the pleasantries. "I did." "You knew I was her husband." "Of course," he said, unfazed. "She talked about you a lot. You were a central figure in her life. And in the story." I clenched my jaw. "You made me look like a joke." Jeremy didn't blink. He took a sip from his cup and placed it gently back on the saucer. "No," he said calmly. "She made you look like a joke." I just quoted her. My hands curled into fists under the table. He leaned forward slightly. "Look, Kyle, you came here for answers. So ask." I exhaled slowly, steadying myself. "Did you sleep with her?" He didn't answer right away, just watched me, like he was measuring the question itself. Then he nodded. "Once. Yes." The word hit harder than I expected, even though I already knew. Deep down I already knew. I sat back, staring at the tiny crack in the porcelain of his coffee cup. Anything to keep my eyes off his face. "When?" I asked. "After the interview," he said. "Same day." I closed my eyes. The image painted itself too vividly. He continued, almost academically, like he was offering commentary on a film we both happened to have watched. "She was electric. There's this tension in her, like she's always halfway between confession and performance. You've seen it, haven't you?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. "She talked about you a lot," he said. "Not cruelly. More like. She needed to explain something about herself, and you were the frame." I looked up then, locked eyes with him. "You didn't need to include the bedroom stuff. That wasn't journalism. That was blood sport." He didn't flinch. It was relevant. "She talked about control, about intimacy, about the way you observed her, even when you loved her. The way you held her so carefully, it made her feel caged." "That's a hell of a way to spin betrayal," I said, voice sharp. "She never called it betrayal," he said. "She called it clarity." I stared at him for a long moment. This wasn't a man who seduced for sport. No, he believed he'd uncovered some profound truth, that he was part of a liberation story. He thought he was the hero. "You know," I said quietly, "when a person is drowning, they'll grab whatever's closest. Doesn't matter if it's another person. Doesn't matter if they pull them under, too." He studied me, a hint of something soft in his eyes. Pity, maybe. Or worse, understanding. "She was drowning, Kyle. Maybe you didn't see it. Or maybe you were too focused on keeping everything in control to notice." I stood. The chair scraped slightly, but I didn't care. "You don't know me," I said. "I know the version she gave me," he replied. "And I know what happened after." I paused, turning halfway toward the door. "You think you broke something open in her," I said. "But all you really did was break something between us." He didn't argue. And that silence, that smug, content silence, that was louder than anything else he said. I walked out of the cafe into the wind, the smell of burnt espresso and betrayal still lingering in my lungs. And for the first time since that article dropped, I wasn't just angry, I was lost. Not because of what she'd done, but because part of me still wanted to believe it hadn't happened. I didn't leave a note. Didn't pack much either, just tossed a few things into a duffel bag, grabbed my wallet and keys, and drove north until the skyline disappeared in my rearview mirror. Somewhere along the coast I turned off my phone. Not because I was angry, because I couldn't bear to see her name light up the screen. I ended up at a roadside inn near Rockford. A quiet, two-story building with chipping paint and paper-thin walls. The kind of place where the front desk still used physical keys, and the vending machine only accepted quarters. No one recognized me there. No one cared. Which was perfect. I spent the first night lying on the stiff mattress, staring at the ceiling fan, spinning slowly above me. My thoughts chased themselves in circles until I couldn't tell what was real and what was just pain dressing up as memory. Had she really done it? I mean, I knew what Jeremy said. I believed him when he said it happened. But the way she'd stood there that night, so cold, so still, a part of me still wondered if she'd spun the whole thing out of control on purpose, for attention, for power. Could she really throw it all away for a headline and a stranger with a microphone? That was the worst part. Not the betrayal itself, but the doubt. Because doubt makes you question everything. Not just the betrayal, but the love that came before it. Was any of it real? Or had I just been a well-lit stage for her to perform on until someone more interesting came along? By the second day, the silence started to turn loud. I walked aimlessly for hours, through empty park trails, side streets no one bothered to pave properly, a gas station that sold the same 4 magazines on a rotating rack. I stopped for coffee 3 times, not because I needed it, but because I wanted the warmth to distract me from how hollow I felt inside. Back home, I imagined my name was still floating through the mouths of morning show hosts and online columnists. Not as Kyle Westbrook, Ph.D. Not as the psychologist who'd published 2 best-selling books and spent his career helping people untangle their traumas. No. Now I was the husband. The man whose wife gave a tell-all interview and hinted she'd found something better. My publisher had called once. Left a voicemail the day before I left. I hadn't listened to it. I didn't need to. I knew what it would say. Damage control. Temporary leave. We're navigating the optics. The phrase navigating the optics makes you feel less like a person and more like a broken lamp in a storefront window. The thing about being away from it all is that it gives your mind room to wander, and mine kept circling back to one thing. Where did I go wrong? Was it the quiet? The way I handled things so clinically? Even when we argued? Was it the fact that I tried so hard to protect her from the world, I forgot to let her feel it? I kept thinking about a conversation we once had, 2 summers ago, lying on the couch with the windows open, the city humming outside. She'd asked me if I thought people could outgrow love. I'd told her no. That real love adapts, expands, evolves. But now I wasn't sure. I sat on a weathered bench behind the inn that second evening, watching the sun sink behind a row of half-dead trees, and for the first time, I didn't feel angry. I felt tired. Bone-deep tired. Then I heard gravel crunching behind me, a car door slamming, footsteps. I didn't turn around, I didn't have to. "Thought you might be here," came her voice. Soft. Measured. Like she'd been rehearsing it the entire drive. I closed my eyes. "Who told you?" I asked, without looking up. "Your assistant. She said your credit card pinged at a diner off the highway. I just guessed the rest." I stayed silent. She moved closer, but not too close. I could feel the space she was leaving between us. Maybe she thought it would help. "I've been looking for you," she said. "I didn't know if you were okay." I let out a slow breath, watching it disappear into the cool dusk air. "Why?" She hesitated. "Because I care." A bitter smile crept to my lips, even though I didn't feel anything close to amusement. Cared enough to humiliate me on a national scale? Her voice cracked just slightly. "That wasn't my intention." I finally turned and looked at her. Her hair was pulled back, her makeup minimal, none of the polish and presence she usually wore like armor. She looked tired. Not in a rehearsed way. In a human way. "That's the problem, Marissa," I said. "You act like intentions matter more than impact." She looked down at her hands, fiddling with her ring. She still wore it. I noticed that. "I just wanted to be seen," she whispered. "Not as someone's wife. As me." I nodded slowly. "And in trying to be seen, you made sure I disappeared." She didn't argue. For once, she didn't fight back. We sat there, the two of us, in silence. Not the kind that hangs between people still trying to find their rhythm. This was the silence of 2 people who used to know each other deeply, and now didn't know where to start. When she finally spoke again, her voice was smaller. "Will you come home?" I looked at her. Really looked. And I realized I didn't have an answer. Not yet. The key still worked. I stood in the hallway for a long moment after the door clicked open, suitcase in hand, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic. Everything looked exactly as I'd left it, so much so it made my stomach tighten. The throw blanket still draped over the arm of the couch, my favorite mug drying by the sink. Her perfume lingered faintly in the air, like it hadn't gotten the memo that the man who once lived here might not anymore. I stepped inside slowly, closed the door behind me, and let the silence close in. Then, her footsteps, soft on the hardwood, hesitant. I turned just as she appeared at the edge of the hallway, Marissa. Hair pulled into a loose braid. No jewelry. Just a soft gray sweatshirt, and the kind of look you give someone when you're not sure if they're here to stay or just to say goodbye. She didn't speak at first. Just let her eyes drift to my suitcase, then back to me. You came back, she said. Not quite a question. I nodded once. Yeah. She crossed her arms, not defensive, but like she needed to hold herself together. I wasn't sure you would. Neither was I. The air between us was thick, like we were standing in the middle of something still burning. I made tea, she said suddenly, as if that could bridge the gap. Chamomile. I looked past her toward the kitchen. The kettle sat on the stove. Steam rising. 2 cups on the counter. She'd been waiting. I'm not here for tea, I said quietly. She didn't move. Then what are you here for? I met her eyes. The truth. Marissa's face didn't change, but I saw the smallest flicker in her eyes. That brief hesitation. Like a bird pausing mid-flight. I already told you, she said, voice calm. The article was exaggerated. You didn't just talk about our intimate life, Marissa, I said, stepping forward. You let the world believe you slept with him. She didn't look away. I never said those words. Because you didn't have to. You gave him everything but a timestamp. Her mouth opened slightly, but she caught herself. Adjusted her tone. You're reading into things that aren't there. I felt my jaw tighten. Then tell me to my face that nothing happened. That you didn't sleep with him. Silence. A long one. She looked down at the floor, then back up at me with eyes that shimmered, but didn't break. Nothing happened, she said. Flat. Clear. Practiced. I stared at her, searching her face for a crack. Something raw. Something human. But her expression was carved from stone. You're lying, I said. She blinked. Once. I'm telling you the truth. No, I said. You're telling me what you need to believe to survive this. I walked past her then. Into the kitchen. Looked at the tea she'd poured. Still warm. 2 cups. Side by side. Like we were just any couple. Any night. Back to normal. I met him, I said, still facing the counter. Jeremy. That caught her off guard. You what? I reached out. We talked. At a cafe. I turned to face her. He confirmed it. She froze. The color drained from her cheeks. I didn't ask for details, I added. Didn't need them. I just needed to hear it from him, because I knew I'd never get the truth from you. Marissa's lips parted, but no sound came out. I took a deep breath. Why didn't you just tell me? She stepped forward, voice trembling now. Because I knew you'd never see me the same. I was never supposed to, I said. You were supposed to be someone I trusted. The room fell silent again. Not the tense silence of an argument, but the kind of silence that follows a confession no one wanted to say out loud. I thought you'd forgive me, she whispered. Eventually. I stared at her, and for the first time I saw the fear behind her composure. Not fear of me. Fear of being alone with the version of herself that did this. I can't forgive what you won't even admit, I said, voice low. She shook her head slowly, eyes glistening now. You always saw me as someone better than I am. I nodded. Yeah, I said. That was the mistake. She sank into the chair by the table, the weight of it all finally dragging her down. But I couldn't sit. Not yet. I walked into the bedroom, dropped my bag and closed the door behind me. And for the second time since this whole mess began, I let myself breathe. But this time, the air felt different. Heavier. Colder. And for the first time since I came home, I wasn't sure this house could hold both of us anymore. 3 weeks passed. Maybe 4. Time lost its shape during that stretch. Days blurred into one another, marked only by the number of patients I saw and the slight shifts in Marissa's tone whenever we crossed paths. We weren't fighting anymore. That required energy neither of us had left. Instead, we lived in the space between politeness and avoidance, like 2 tenants sharing a lease on something already condemned. I went back to work. Quietly. No announcements, no grand return. Just slipped into my office one morning, straightened the diplomas on the wall, and let the familiarity of other people's pain give me distance from my own. I started to feel grounded again, stable, even managed to sleep through the night once or twice. The press had calmed down, or so I thought. The article had done its damage, sure, but scandals moved fast these days. Someone else's marriage was always falling apart louder than yours. Then came Tuesday morning. I was in line at the coffee shop by my office, waiting for a cappuccino when I saw it. A tabloid. Bottom shelf. Bright red headline. wife of celebrity psychologist, slept her way into the spotlight, and beneath it, Marissa's face, not posed, not filtered. A photo taken through a window, mouth open mid-sentence, eyes wide. She looked cornered, hunted. I froze. The man behind me grunted, told me to move. I didn't. I bought the paper without thinking. Sat in my car, engine running, as I flipped through it. There were photos, screenshots, a leaked email chain between Marissa and Jeremy, intimate, flirtatious, time-stamped before the interview, before the article, before everything. And then, there it was. He wanted to be part of my rise, she'd written. He just didn't realize I'd already started without him. I couldn't breathe. I drove home faster than I should have, heart pounding, hands white-knuckled on the wheel. When I burst through the door, Marissa was sitting on the couch with her laptop. She didn't look surprised to see me, just slowly closed the lid. I slammed the divorce papers down on the table. She stared at them like they were foreign, like she hadn't once dared me to do this. "You don't mean this," she whispered. "Yes," I said, "I do." It went public within days. My attorney filed fast. The prenup made things clean, but the press made it messy. Articles, headlines, opinions from people who'd never even met us. Psychologist sue his influencer wife after infidelity scandal. The internet ate it up. She tried to reach me a dozen times. Through texts, through calls, through friends. But I was done playing interpreter for a version of her that no longer existed. And when I walked out of that courtroom, with everything settled in black and white ink, I felt something I hadn't in months. Not revenge, not relief, just silence. Real silence. The kind that follows the end of something loud. The courthouse was colder than I expected. Marble floors, flickering fluorescence, the smell of old paper and stronger cologne than necessary. I stood next to my attorney, hands in my pockets, while Marissa sat across the aisle beside hers, arms folded, lips pressed into a line so sharp it could cut. She didn't look at me. She hadn't really looked at me in weeks. Her hair was pinned back in that practiced way she always used when she wanted to project strength. But I could see the tremble in her fingers when she thought no one was watching. It didn't matter anymore. The prenup was ironclad. The house, the assets, even the royalties from my books, every cent stayed with me, not because I wanted revenge, not even because I was angry, because I needed the final word to be mine. When the judge banged the gavel and said the words that officially ended us, Marissa didn't flinch. Neither did I. We'd both run out of flinching to do. The months that followed were strange. Not better, not worse. Just quiet. People stopped whispering when I entered rooms. I got booked again. Podcasts, conferences, a revised edition of my second book. Suddenly I was the resilient one. The guy who got humiliated and kept his spine. Funny how quickly pity turns into branding. I moved out of the apartment. Didn't want to haunt the walls where everything fell apart. Found a place just outside the city, smaller, older, with creaky floors and a porch that overlooked a garden I never tended. It wasn't much, but it was mine. There were nights I'd stand on that porch with a cup of black coffee, staring at nothing in particular. The wind would press through the trees and remind me that silence, when it's not forced on you, can actually feel like peace. That's when I thought the story was over. That's when I thought I could finally stop waiting for the other shoe to drop. Until one morning, I got a call from an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. But when I played it back, her voice filled the room. "Kyle, it's me. I know I'm the last person you want to hear from. I wouldn't be calling if it wasn't important. Please call me back." I stared at the phone, thumb hovering over the delete button. But I didn't press it. Not yet. 2 hours later I called her. She picked up on the first ring. "Hi," she said, breathless like she'd just run up a flight of stairs, or cried through a long shower. "What do you want?" I asked. She hesitated, and then, "I'm pregnant." The words hit me like a gust of cold wind through a cracked window. My throat went dry. I didn't speak. "I found out last week," she said softly. "It's his, Jeremy's. I don't even have a way to reach him. He left for Europe right after the story broke. Deleted all his socials. He's gone." I swallowed hard. She continued, her voice cracking now. "I've been thinking a lot. About what I did. About what we had. I know I can't fix it, Kyle. I know I ruined everything, but part of me thought maybe if I just said it out loud, you'd know I'm not hiding anymore." I sat down slowly at the edge of my bed, the phone pressed against my ear. She was still talking. I miss you, she whispered. I miss us. I miss how safe it used to feel, even when it was boring. I miss your quiet. I miss how you made the world make sense. The silence on my end stretched long. Finally, I said, you miss the version of me who didn't know what you were capable of. She didn't answer, and I wasn't done. I hope the baby is healthy. I hope you're okay. But this, what you're doing now, it's not love. It's regret looking for a place to land. A quiet gasp from her end. Maybe a stifled sob. Do you hate me? She asked. I looked out the window. No, I said. I just don't believe in you anymore. She didn't hang up. Neither did I. We sat in that shared emptiness for a few more seconds, suspended in this space where love used to live. Then I spoke one last time. You know what I've realized? What? Loyalty isn't loud. It doesn't write headlines. It doesn't make people famous. It's quiet, steady, like a heartbeat. And once it's gone, you don't hear it leave, but you feel the silence it leaves behind. I hung up, let the silence speak. Later that night, I walked out to the porch again. The sky was bruised with dusk, and the first chill of autumn settled on my shoulders. I thought about everything I'd given, everything she threw away like it didn't cost anything. And I thought about how sometimes the cleanest endings come not from fire, but from finally putting the match down.